welcome everyone to the Roast, Sworn Everything. You are joined by your most serious Irishman, Fenian, and of course I have Nolsey here. How you going, Nolsey?
All right, just chilling out this evening.
Yeah, we might have a bit of a more chilled out episode actually, because only 16 pages of prep. Usually there's 20 plus, so maybe a little shorter for you today, guys. We are coming to you on time though, which means we're only covering 6 days because we were late last week. So anyway, we thought we would switch it up a bit today and start off with education. And this is because we just had the final report from the university's Accord. So this was a broad-ranging review of the tertiary education sector, mainly universities, but it does include TAFE and other colleges.
Yeah.
And
institutions of learning in general.
That's right. Many of which are a waste of time, of course,
Yeah.
which we'll get to. So there are pretty wide-ranging recommendations. It looks like Jason Clare, who is the education minister, is actually pretty keen on implementing a lot of them. And there's also some kind of trademark labour policies thrown in the mix as well for future reform. So I will read out the main recommendations that the Accord report has made. They want to more than double uni places to 1.8 million by 2050. Moving to needs-based funding for certain groups and courses to make the system more equitable. Getting 80% of working-age Australians tertiary educated by 2050. Yeah, good luck with that one. No. Dumping the Coalition's Job Ready Graduates program that puts costs up for arts degrees. Better financial support for students and paying them for compulsory placements. And finally, moving towards a HECS or HELP loan system where contributions are based on future potential earnings. Okay. I think I pretty much disagree with all of them. Like, I did read it before, but after I verbalize them, I'm like, actually, I don't think, maybe the only one is getting rid of the Jobs Ready program. The Jobs Ready program, what this was designed to do was to find financial incentives for doing courses that are for jobs with skill shortages. So, for example, nursing, we have a big shortage of nurses, which is why we can import so many Filipinos. And at the same time, disincentivizing students to take on humanities degrees. It's like...
What should happen?
Yeah, well, look, my position has always been that, like, if you're going to do a humanities degree, you've got to either make the commitment to get at least an honours, you know, like if you just get a Bachelor of Arts in political science or something, that's not going to get you anywhere, like nowhere. So you have to at least commit to becoming an academic or something, or, you know, doubling your degree with journalism or something like that. In other words, you've got to make it so that you can actually get a job out of it by the time you get to the end of it. And yeah, if you don't do that, then I think you should either be not allowed into the course or you should have to pay more money. But the thing is, Nolsey, it's not working. Like, I watched Jason Clare's interview on Insiders on Sunday, and he said that the people who are keen to go and study a humanities degree, they're not being deterred by the increased price. Maybe that's because it's a loan and, you know, you don't have to worry about it right now. But he did say, on the whole, it has not created the desired effect. And the report said the same thing as well, I must add. So, yeah.
Well, yeah, no, it's one of those government programs that, like, is trying to put a anti-incentive in without kind of realizing the core problem that, you know, that, say, industry that has a shortage, or like the reasons why people want to do a liberal arts degree outside of being some gay politician's rent boy. But yeah,
Jesus,
no,
man,
it's just,
how Americanized are you? Liberal arts degrees? They're just arts degrees in Australia. But go on.
well, just communicating for a wider audience. The Americans have abducted me.
Okay, we have to cater and
I'll be saying
handicap
gas
ourselves
station
with everything.
before you know it. No, but yeah, it's an instance of just basically putting a policy in, it just having some kind of negative effect, and then completely missing why or what other reasons would they have or would they see for people, one, going into humanitarians degrees, and two, why said industry would actually have a shortage. It's normally best to, like, if it's not immediately fixed on the supply side, it's normally a much more complicated problem that probably actually warrants its own investigation.
Yeah, well, look, I would say that like the main reason why people aren't going into a profession like nursing and therefore not studying these degrees in high enough
Shit.
numbers is simply the fact that nurses don't get paid enough. Now, we're talking about financial incentives, aren't we? Surely that extends beyond the university campus. We need to know how much money we're going to earn once we've done the degree and we get the job later on. And a lot of people are just sort of making that calculation and saying it's not worth it. And that they maybe just think it's just as worthwhile to get a psychology degree or something like that. And I've made this point before, but you've got this really unusual situation in Australia where you have a surplus supply of psychology degrees and people studying psychology, but you have a shortage of clinical psychologists, and how does that work? Well, it's very simple. People aren't doing the postgraduate work. They're just getting the undergraduate degree, and then they leave. And that basically, a psychology degree by itself can't really get you anywhere. You have to do at least...
You are going to work for the government department that deals with worker suicides.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I found. People with those kind of degrees, with those kind of humanities degrees, they usually, just go and work for a government department later on. I guess just because they've learned how to kind of, reading, writing, research skills, which I guess, if there's anything utilitarian about it, I guess it skills you up in that regard. But even then, it's like you could just do a few night courses or whatever and you'd gain the correct skills to get one of those government jobs. There's no need to go through the 3 or 4 years or whatever it is to do it. Anyway, that was one of them. Let's just go through a couple of the other ones. So one was, increasing the amount of uni places to 1.8 million by 2050 and getting working age Australians, 80% of them tertiary educated by 2050. No, why? Like, okay, first of all, you're just not going to get there. I mean, the amount of people currently going to university is about like 26%, or at least that's like on average, that's how many go through in modern times. It used to be like 4% or something. Nowadays, approximately, when people leave high school, around about 1/4 of them go to university, and that is already too much. I already think there's too many people going to uni, right? And I'm not being an elitist or whatever. If you want to go. And if it's what you want to do, then do it. I definitely encourage that. But, you need to weigh up your options and think maybe a trade is better for me. Maybe you don't even need that. Maybe you just need to go and get a job right out of high school. And you'll save yourself money. And you'll have an extra 3 or 4 years of full-time earning to go along with it. So, and by the way, the very fact that we have those issues I just mentioned before, like people doing too many humanities degrees, that's because we have an excess of people studying. And those kind of problems just simply wouldn't be there if we didn't have such a culture to push people into university all the time. So, I definitely disagree with that. If I were to set a target, it would be like getting the number back down to 10%. Because that's all you need, That would go just fine. And you do hear all the time of like, people working on mine sites who have law degrees or something. And it's like, why did you get that degree? If you're just like driving a bogger.
You're going to shovel dirt.
Yeah. It's like you could have spent the 4 years you spent earning that degree working. Instead you got yourself into a big student debt. And that's the other thing too. We have a huge student debt problem. So, let's look at that one. Contributions are based on a future potential earnings. Well, okay, that would mean you would make arts degrees very cheap then, wouldn't you? Because they're not going to get
Yes.
you anywhere. So I don't know if that's a good one either. It sort of looks good on the surface, doesn't it? Like, one that pays higher dividends, you should therefore be expected to contribute more. But at the same time, it's like, no, not really, because what you did was you showed that you took on a course that led to a productive job, a productive career later on, meaning you're actively contributing to the economy. So in that respect, it doesn't actually really make sense for you to pay extra, I don't think.
Yeah, I was going to say, and also, how are they going to like scale or gauge this? Because there's only a handful of degrees and a handful of like qualifications where you can just turn around and say, "Oh yeah, you will be making in the ballpark of like this," and when you get out, and then is it in line with market fluctuations? Because I know engineering, basically, if you're an engineer in 2020, you were making shit tons of money because they could not get in more.
Yeah. Yeah, and then you've got a profession like law where their wages or their salaries or whatever can vary incredibly. So, really only things like teaching and nursing, those ones would be pretty steady. Those ones I'm sure you could make a calculation on, but yeah, not much else. Not really in the sciences or in law, I don't think. Okay, so look, let's go on to what Jason Clare specifically said about the future reforms going on here. So he said that students should receive higher welfare payments and paid work experience placements. I definitely do agree with the latter one, paid work experience placements. I'll never forget, man, I was on... I did a shit-kicking builder's labourer's job a few years ago. And there was this kid who was I know you don't like them, Nolsey, but he was a structural engineer. And he was doing VAC work, where they do like 3 months during the summer. Like,
vocational.
You've got to do the 3 months to actually complete the degree. And this guy, I remember, was actually earning $12 an hour, and he was working 12-hour days as well. And I felt so sorry for him because everyone treated him like shit. He was everyone's absolute bitch. And other workers on the site really resented, like, if he were to ask them to do anything, which he was supposed to do because he was not a labourer. He was there, and part of the training was to sort of, train you up as a supervisor as well. And no one wanted to listen to the poor guy. So I actually took him aside and I say, hey, listen, man, if there's anything I can do, like if I'm qualified to do it or whatever, come and ask me, because I know when everyone else is giving you the cold shoulder here. So, yeah, I think...
Poor bastard.
I really, really felt sorry for the guy. But no, they get exploited, though. The VAC, I'm sure being an engineer, VAC workers really get exploited in a very similar way that apprentices get exploited as well for cheaper labor. So yeah, coming down harder on that. You want them to have much more experience, and it's always good to kind of do as much of your training in the workforce and rather than in the classroom. I think that's really important. But at the same time, you've got to be paid for it. You've got to be paid properly for the work you're doing. So, yeah. Okay, now here's this other one. A first student's ombudsman. So this would be like an independent body that deals with complaints. And it would also be things like deficient degrees or complaints about course structure and all that kind of stuff. But the main reason that they want to introduce this is because of the crisis in sexual assault levels that apparently happen on Australian campuses. So going by, there was another
you need to
one.
get me off of them. I'm committing all of them.
Well, look, there was a report again put out about this. It seems like there's like one of these every 6 months on the amount of sexual violence, as they put it, on university campuses. And I'm sorry, I don't have the numbers in front of me here, but I do remember I saw this woman on ABC talking about it. And if you have seen these numbers before, it's something ridiculous, like 1 in 4 have experienced some form of sexual assault, and then they'll say it's like 2/3 have experienced sexual harassment. It's always really, really high numbers like that. But this woman actually said that she expected the numbers to be even higher for this report than they were. And the reason why is because part of the report's time overlapped with COVID. So at a time when a lot of students were not on campus and, just had to do remote learning or whatever. She did not mention the methodology of the report. And if it's anything like the ones we've seen before, we know that they're just emails that go out and say, hey, are you interested in partaking in a survey to do with sexual assault on campus? And then you got to think, who are the most likely people to actually respond to those emails?
Blue-haired crazies?
Yes, the purple-haired eccentrics that we have far too many of. But Jason Clare is very, very adamant that this student ombudsman is going to be implemented and is going to have real powers to deal with this so-called crisis in sexual assault in Australia.
Yeah, I was going to say, I remember back in the day when some of the guys would reply to those emails and just basically try and boost up the male sexual assault things. So sometimes they had like a form on it and then be like, select male and then just like create like the most fucked up story possible. Because no one actually takes them seriously.
I never got in on anything like that. No, I mean, they should have all just come in and said no, like... You want to be honest here, and because I remember like when I was at uni hearing all these ridiculous stories like people would say, oh, this girl got like raped here during this time or whatever, and I was like, what, you mean in a spot where everyone can see them? Like, that's just ridiculous. And just going by my own time there and speaking to the people who I actually went to class and everything with, I never met anyone who was actually raped or sexually assaulted. They'd always just heard stories elsewhere, but like I never met any of those people ever.
No. So. Well, that was
and they weren't
like and there weren't even when there was like a case of sexual assault. Yeah. Well, I went at a time where there was fucking Brigittes, and when there was a sexual assault, like you didn't actually hear about it, but there was a police report.
Yeah, I mean, if they are increasing in any way, I still don't think it would be much. But it would probably be to do with the increasing amounts of Pajeets, but Africans as well, And you do unfortunately see, a few African faces on campus. Yeah. And they do tend to be like Sudanese as well here in Perth, like really, really black.
They ruined my day.
Okay, so anyway, getting off universities, we also had a report which was to do with how they divide public funding between public schools and private schools. So this report found that private schools spend $175.6 million on facilities. Did spend that much in 2021 compared to $174.4 million at public schools. So this is where they're basically saying, well, look, given the contributions given by parents to the fees here, why is it that private schools still actually get slightly more funding when it comes to the construction of new facilities? Why do they get more than the public schools? And apparently also, if you look at the kind of facilities that these private schools are building, they tend to be the so-called, luxury or lavish ones, the very kind of special, decked out concert halls and gymnasiums and that kind of thing. I don't know about that because, I mean, I definitely know of a lot of public schools who have those kind of facilities too. Like the public school I went to is absolutely awash with really fancy stuff. Like I went to a public school, but I went to, one of the more prestigious ones, I guess you could say. On paper, anyway, that's what it was. And I never ever thought the entire time I was there, and I certainly don't think it now, that they are deprived of funding. I would never ever say that. So, as a response, private schools have said that the report is absurd and misleading. And they say that their capital works are largely self-funded by parents and school communities. So look, I don't have the details here, but they're basically disputing the figures. It looks like what they're saying there, if it's self-funded by parents and school communities, they're actually saying that a lot of the facilities they're building are there not from public funds, but their own. So anyway, Jason Clare loves telling people that, he comes from Western Sydney. He was a product of public education, and that he was the first person in his family to ever go to uni. So, he's got a real bootstraps kind of story. And basically, he agrees that public schools need to get more funding, and he's already acted on that given the new agreement that they made with WA, where WA is going to match the amount of extra funding that the Commonwealth is pouring in. And basically, he wants to extend that to the other states as well. So while he's not talking about cutting funding for private schools, he's definitely talking about boosting it for public schools. And he's definitely very committed to getting people in poorer areas and regional areas to university as well. Which, again, to that I say,
okay.
No. Well, look, that's another one of those things that sounds good on paper, I think.
Yeah, and then you completely and utterly fleece the those areas of their human capital.
You do. But the other thing is, like, the people who, say, do grow up in those areas, if they genuinely want to go to uni, usually they have a way of making it happen,
Yeah.
And the other thing is, like, a lot of, young people in their, late teens, early 20s, like, that is the age you're supposed to kind of go out and have a bit of an adventure anyway, Not everyone does it, but, that's the age where you go off backpacking and whatever. So a lot of people in those areas actually just like the idea of moving away and going into a city centre or something for a few years while they do their course. And generally speaking, those who want to do that will make it happen. There are ways of doing it. And, I really don't think we need to, like, build more campuses, like, closer to them or whatever. Again, I'm not totally opposed to the idea. I'm just saying, like, a lot of the time you are trying to fix a problem that's not there. It's like, yes. How many of those people actually want to go to uni, and how many of them would be better off because they went to uni? That second question is more.
I was going to say also, since the Industrial Revolution, we've had, like, incentives to leave, like, rural areas and just become an urbanite. Like, those incentives have been there. Those pathways to do that have been there for quite literally over 100 years. All you're doing here is just allowing for more fleecing.
Yeah, that too. And yeah, this is just, generally speaking, public polling shows that Labor is rated better on education and health generally, and then Liberals usually get better marks when it comes to the economy. So, this is kind of trademark Labor stuff. And, Dunkley by-election coming up as well. It's a selling point. So, yeah, wait and see, because, this is obviously like a type of reform that would be implemented over a very long time. So, yeah, we're short on details at this stage, but yeah, it'll be interesting. And what I'm also interested in is to see if perhaps during the selling of this reform package that Jason Clare becomes a bit more of a visible minister in the Albanese government, and therefore may be seen as leadership material at some point, because a lot of people have said that about him. Even though he's still, like, one of the quieter sort of ministers on the front bench, he is extremely slick and very good in front of the cameras. So, yeah, he's like one of those ministers, I'll say, very good chance he'll be leader of the Labor Party and maybe even Prime Minister one day. Not that I like the guy. He's a race traitor, I should point out. He has half children. So So yeah,
Disgusting.
but I am just saying though, like, if I'm purely just looking on this in terms of likelihood of leaders, I think he's up there. Anyway, oh well, one last story on education. That is, what was the name of that guy, Nolsey? Who said, if I don't take it, someone else will.
Oh, God, he's unnamed. If I don't steal it, somebody else will. Oh no, he is named. He is named.
He
I'll
is. I
find
just
it.
can't remember. Was it Yakov or something?
Yakov. It was Yakov something. Yeah.
Yeah, because the woman actually like yells out his name while he's there in the backyard.
Yakov. Yeah.
So, well, a poster of this guy was actually cited at Macquarie University, and it had a picture of Yakov there with the Star of David on it, and he's actually got him inside like a little seal that says, "If I don't steal it, someone else will." So apparently, this is to do with political advertising coming from the Macquarie Socialist Society, and it is basically a poster against what Israel is currently doing in Gaza and what they're about to do in Rafah. But some students took photos of this, Jewish students, and made Australian Jewish News aware of it.
Yep.
And so if you read the headline of this article, which is basically just about this poster being cited, it says Jewish students feel unsafe just because they saw that poster, which of course they are describing as blatantly anti-Semitic. I don't know. It's a direct quote, guys. This guy.
Yeah, how about you? Don't be fucking terrible people on camera and literally muscle your way into people's houses. Like, how about that? How about you can just be like a fucking human being with a soul for 5 seconds? Oh wait, you can't help yourself but be demonic.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm glad we're still getting mileage out of this guy, because when that current incursion was going on at the time, where you had the protests against, what was actually the seizure of Palestinian homes, and remember they said that they had not been paying their rent. That was the excuse.
Oh yeah.
If we cast our mind back to this guy.
Around.
Yeah, and,
so not paying rent on a fucking house that they owned because you just came in and said, actually, now you're all renters.
That's right. And naturally, obviously, they refused to pay the rent. They're like, okay, get out. We're bulldozing them now. Which is, just what they do. But, I mean, that in and of itself was very bad PR for Israel. But then they got that guy on camera saying that, and that was just the cherry on top. It was great. And I'm glad people still remember it, too.
It's fucking horrendous. It was like one of the most fucking horrendous videos I've seen coming out of that entire conflict was just him, like, fucking fat, pudgy, fucking rabbi in training looking motherfucker.
He was from Brooklyn, wasn't he? He was
he's from Brooklyn.
New York Jew.
He also had some, I believe he actually had some criminal charges against him, and that's why they basically were like,
that's why he escaped to Israel, of course. All right.
But so we'll move on. Did you see that one journalist that went and interviewed him, and they had like a fucking little Palestinian manservant?
No, I did not see that, but that does not surprise me. Okay, we'll move on to climate and energy now. And, it looks like our domestic gas policy here in WA is supposedly not fit for purpose anymore. So all this is for all of the gas that we export from WA to other markets, we must keep 15% of whatever is exported into a state supply, and that is basically to make sure that we don't run out of gas. And during times where there might be shortages, we can call on that reserve. Sorry, were you going to say something?
No, I was going to say, yeah, that's so we don't run out of gas, but also it's a catch-all because basically that program was the only reason where we actually still retained that was it a Swedish vessel or some kind of Scandinavian vessel, that one oil ship that was like nearly going to break contract with us. Sorry, gas ship that was nearly going to break contract with us because we basically fucked the price of gas.
Oh, okay. Well, look, I mean, it has proven to be successful because, as we know, the eastern states have had like gas shortages happen in recent years. In WA, we've never really had that problem. But what this new study found was that despite the fact we're doing pretty well by storing away that 15%, it's still not enough, they're saying. And the reason is very simple. Because with the transition from fossil fuels to green energy, the fossil fuel of choice to make that transition is gas. You know, we want to shut down coal-fired ones. Coal is the major enemy, so we want to shut those down. And
coal
while we're shutting
evil. Gas is good.
Yeah. So while we're shutting down our coal mines and our coal-fired stations, we still need to burn some form of fossil fuel while we're, constructing all of these green energy projects. So the fossil fuel of choice, like the lesser of the evils, is gas. So under current projections, even though we have been doing this for close to 20 years now, I think, this policy, it was introduced under Alan Carpenter, Labor government, that is still not enough. It has been good enough up until now, but yeah, with this transition going on, it won't be good enough. And so if it's not good enough for us, what's it going to be like over East, where no one has a policy like that? They don't have a policy for putting gas in reserve for amounts exported. They just don't do it.
I'm actually genuinely hoping they actually start up a policy of doing that. Now I'm thinking about it because it's like, yeah, okay, we've already had like fucking power grid issues, and you've flubbed it off on a single company, which is the WOE company. But it's just like, no, it's more than that. You had fucking catastrophic collapse of a fucking section of grid. Then we can combine that with the inability to actually generate kilowatt hours in the first place, and it's also going to be in the most populous states of the country. This is going to be a problem, isn't it?
It's going to be a major problem. So, this report is only just a small sign of things to come. Now, that's still not stopping the government from spruiking their green energy cred. And we've got the ASEAN conference coming up next week. So, I forget what the acronym stands for. It's basically Australia and the Southeast Asian countries. So, Indonesia, the Philippines, etc. And during the procession going on here, we're going to have these, they apparently are luxury vehicles, the BMW iX SUV, which is a luxury electric vehicle. And there's going to be a motorcade of them driving to Melbourne. So yeah.
What?
They're doing this to kind of show off, I guess it's just sort of, in a way, it's supposed to be all the pomp that you do during a national conference like this. But it's also there as a way of promoting electric vehicles, which seems a really unusual way of doing it, because you're rolling out like these really, really expensive cars that only rich people can afford and saying like, this is the future. You'd think at the very least they'd want to drive out some affordable ones, because it's not great advertising, I don't think.
No. In fact, like, again, I think they're going to struggle to actually make cars affordable, these types of cars affordable in the first place, just because, one, the resources to fucking, like, disposal, fabrication, where it gets fabricated, where the parts get fabricated. We're not talking about an operation like, the Detroit auto industry. But
No.
yeah, no, it's
And we're not going to be manufacturing any of those electric vehicles in
I was going to say,
Australia.
you're not going to have electric cars in the future. You're just going to have no car in the future. They're just going to take that from you.
Well, they'll definitely take your fossil fuel car away. I mean, look, that's the whole idea between these national fuel efficiency standards. The government is just sort of trying to make everyone believe that it's nothing more than like a public education campaign. You know, they'll just say, all right, you're buying this gas guzzler, you know, your carbon footprint is going to be X amount. No, it's not going to be like that. They're going to put a massive tax on it instead. Whereas with the electric car, you might get a rebate or something like that. So
yeah, I was going to say, if you want a vision, look at the future, all you need to do is imagine a bald man with ear gauges pedaling on a bicycle again and again.
Yeah, and if you're like me, you really hate cyclists and you want to run them over. So, not all of you. Some of you are fine. It's just the ones who don't break the ones who break the rules really in the shits. Anyway, what were we doing? Oh well, look. Here's somewhat good news though, and that is ever since the trade war between Australia and China has sort of cooled.
Oh Jesus!
Some fuckwit doing a burnout outside my house there. Since that has cooled, it looks like the demand for Australian coal has actually recovered.
Yep.
How about that? Even though we just shut our major coal mine here in Collie, or at least it's on the way out in WA, all of that demand for coal is still there. Like certainly at the international level, but you know, if we weren't paying for all this green energy shite, the demand for coal would be just as strong. Here, just selling it on the domestic market. So anyway, this was a 2-year ban that China imposed on Australia. It fueled a surge in thermal coal exports to Indo-Pacific countries. But the new figures revealed that China in 2023 eclipsed pre-pandemic levels with more than 36 million tons of thermal and metallurgical coal, which is worth about $5.7 billion. So they've got that strong desire for it, and they want to buy it from us. So that's good. That's about the only positive economic indicator I've read in a while, though. So will it be enough to make us avoid a technical recession before the end of the year?
Probably not.
No.
I was going to say our entire relationship with China can be very simple. We're just making it retarded, and we're doing it on purpose.
Of course. Okay, now, actually, another bit of good news, I guess. 2/3 of younger Australians would back a proposal to replace retired coal-fired power plants with small modular nuclear reactors. So in other words, nuclear plants. So this was a news poll conducted for The Australian. It found that 55% of all Australian voters support the idea of small modular nuclear reactors as a replacement for coal-fired power, but the support among the different age groups was highest among 18 to 34-year-olds, young people.
Yeah.
And also, by the way, the age group who is most concerned about climate change. And 65% of them said they would approve of those nuclear reactors being used. So that looks like it's telling us if they are concerned about climate change and they support nuclear power, they must be connecting the dots. They might actually realize
it might not be as retarded as they seem.
Yeah, that nuclear power has zero carbon emissions whatsoever. Now, even though that's perhaps a faulty reason for supporting nuclear power, it's still correct. You will actually reduce emissions enormously.
If that's
If you go,
if that's your category of analysis, the cradle to grave on nuclear power is significantly like not even the same fucking ballpark as basically every other technology.
right. But I mean, Greenies historically have been adamantly opposed to nuclear power, despite that. And they'll just come up with a whole bunch of other reasons. And they always like to cover up the fact that CO2 is non-existent in nuclear emissions. So I guess it sort of shows that their propaganda is not quite as effective as what they would like it to be. And most young people do understand that, yeah, nuclear power could be used as a tool, a very powerful one, if you want to make climate change your overarching fight. So, positive numbers. Okay, now we're going to get into some more environmental taxes that are being proposed here. They're talking about this a lot in the lead up to the Dunkley by-election, trying to make it look like, and I think it's true, if you look at the forward estimates, Labor is basically planning to hit people with a lot more new taxes. Many of them are to do with climate and energy. Now, one of them here is what would be seen as a recycling tax, a world first. So the body representing recycling contractors, and they're responsible for servicing around 80% of Australian households, is asking the Environment Minister, Tanya Plibersek, to carve out paper and cardboard from regulations proposed for recyclables from July 1st. So,
right?
What?
All right.
So, the government's proposed cost recovery model for administering a new waste export licensing scheme proposed for recyclable exporters from July 1st. They're saying that this should be scrapped in its entirety. I know there's a lot of fancy words thrown in there, but basically what it is just a tax on recycling. You get taxed for recycling more of your goods. So for all of the stuff you throw in the yellow bin or whatever, these companies would be taxed for that and in turn would pass that price on to consumers. But yeah.
Why?
I don't know.
I already don't want to recycle.
I recycle as least as possible.
Why are you just making it harder for me? Why are you taxing me on this? Are you fucking retarded? I'm literally just going to go get a real property and start burning shit.
Yeah, I mean, look, maybe this will have some positive consequences in the end. If it does actually stop people from recycling, it might be a good thing.
Recycling. You're making someone do this fucking laborious thing for oh yes, it's for the good of the planet, and then you're just gonna turn that dude into a guy looking at a fire, flame glistening in his eyes, just saying fuck taxes.
Yeah, I mean it's also it's not a direct tax. But it's just all the new regulations that they're forcing on the industry. I mean, it does include Richard Pratt, who's a Jew. So, not all such a bad thing. But, most of Australia's recyclable waste does not end up being recycled. A lot of it actually ends up in overseas landfills.
Yeah.
That are subject to basically no environmental regulation whatsoever. You can make good use out of a landfill because they can produce methane that can be harnessed for energy. But those landfills that you're talking about overseas, they never do that.
No.
It's just nothing but fucking rubbish. And poor people pick through it in the hopes that they'll find something valuable in it.
Yeah, it's it's the McDonald's playpen, but you're in Malaysia and you're a 5-year-old Malay boy.
Yes.
It's fucked, but it's funny.
Okay, so moving on to the economy. the Stage 3 tax cuts have passed the Senate, which means that obviously that is well and truly in time for the new financial year, which is when they will take effect. So the government, I think, is very pleased with the fact that these have gone through before the Dunkley by-election. They're actually somewhat selling the Dunkley by-election as a referendum on the Stage 3 tax cuts, despite the fact that Labor, broke a promise with this because they did not go with the model that they promised, which of course was legislated by Scott Morrison 5 years ago. They're still very proud of it, and they're still spruiking it all the time. And I got a leaflet in the mail today, actually, from Labor about the Stage 3 tax cuts. And it's featuring quite prominently in their advertising in Dunkley as well.
Okay.
So it seems like they think it's popular. Now, if you look at recent polling data, though, basically it's all staying the same. Like Liberal 48, Labor 52. But I was watching 7:30 the other night, and what's her name? Laura Tingle was saying that in some polls, Labor's numbers have actually been going down. Now, that means that people either are not really sold on these and they don't think it's like such a life-saving thing, or they're just generally mad at Labor for a lot of other matters. The fact that they kicked the can down the road for a year and a half talking about a referendum when they should have been tackling all these other issues. So it's sort of seen in a way as a too little, too late gesture. And despite that, look, Labor are probably still going to win, but just with a reduced majority. That's all.
Yeah.
So there'll be a swing against them. It's basically a safe Labor seat. And
there's been too many political hits taken for that not to be the case.
Yeah, and I mean, like, generally speaking, by-elections do not go the way of a sitting government. They either lose the seat or they have a swing against them. In this case, I think it will just be a swing against them. But we have to remember that they've also only been in power for 2 years. So the it's time factor isn't quite resonating at that point. And if you're wondering why we have a Dunkley by-election coming up, it's because, if you remember, the member actually died. Peter Murphy, Peter with an A. She died of breast cancer at the age of 50. So, yeah, that's why we've got it. Okay, now, what was I bloody saying before I got sidetracked there? The tax cuts. So, once they actually do come into effect in the new financial year in July, what is it like? On average, we'll just have like a few extra bucks in our pocket. And during that time, tomatoes would have gone up by $3 a kilo or something, thus neutralizing and even going further into negative territory. So it's just not going to work. People are not going to feel any immediate cost of living relief pressure being taken off their hands. And yeah, I still think,
just a quick reminder to the public: you're here to suffer. No one's going to save you. Goodbye.
Yeah, I mean, that's not the kind of message they'd want going into an election.
Not at all.
But yeah, this is why, I'll say it again, Albo could be a one-term prime minister, because every economic metric by the time we get to the next election is probably going to be negative, including unemployment, and we might even be in a recession at that time. At the very least, they're going to lose some seats. At the very least. Okay, so talking about the trade war, as we called it with China again, it looks like we're pretty much calling off this war. So we're laying down arms, and that includes on tariffs on Australian wine and wine duties. So This was another one that they imposed on us that was actually up to 200%. I remember the vineyards in Margaret River were screaming over this.
Yep.
So that was back in 2020. Disputes over COVID and all that kind of stuff. I always thought that was pathetic of China, like how they would react angrily to people criticizing them over COVID. You know, it's like, look, whatever theory you might have over how COVID got started or how it broke out or whatever it is, I think we're all pretty safe in knowing that it started in China, okay, in some form. Whatever you think it was, a lab leak or a bioweapon or whatever the fuck, it started in China.
Influencer eating bat soup. Like, whatever. It doesn't matter.
Right. And so when politicians made comments like there should be an inquiry into it, like, oh, what? Fucking huge sin. And then China goes ballistic and implements a trade war, which just always just seemed to like be extremely arrogant to me. It's like, yeah, no, it did come from over there. It is your fault. And, you know, yes, people did die because of COVID or died a lot earlier than what they otherwise would have. Right.
Yeah. So again, it's the one thing you really can't do with a Chinese person, which is embarrass them. That's it. Yeah. It's like that one fucking bugaboo. It's fucking annoying. Even though
they talk a lot about, you know, like saving face is a real thing in, you know, in Asian cultures.
Yep.
But yeah, the Chinese do seem pretty hard to be embarrassed, despite that. It's a real thing for the Japanese. I don't know. So much for Chinese.
Yeah, no. If you embarrass a Japanese person, you'll probably get like an apology, or something like that. But you know, if you also, you know, some culpability or responsibility about the action that's causing the embarrassment or frustration. With the Chinese, you're going to get fucking tortured, fronted, and mogged. Like that's it. They just will not take it. It is not their fucking responsibility.
No, and I mean, they'd always just hit back by saying, oh, you didn't have proper quarantine measures in place. It was like, okay, maybe some of that criticism is valid, but at the end of the day, you guys started the fucking virus. It is your fault. It's where it began. So, you know, putting aside what our reactions were to it, surely we'd all agree that prevention is better than cure, and you should prevent a pandemic from actually taking place. But anyway, so talking about the duopoly that we apparently have in Australia. Now, I heard Bob Catter saying that, I'm talking about grocery stores here, Coles and Woolworths, the duopoly. Bob Catter said that apparently Coles and Woolworths own 90% of the market value for groceries in WA. In Australia.
Yeah.
I don't know. Do you reckon it's that much? Because, I mean, you still have Aldi, you have IGA.
You'd be surprised. Basically, when you're looking at Woolworths or something like that, you're not just looking at the branding Woolworths. You're looking at other things they sell, other companies and other things they sell as well. So, for example, there's still actually a lot of shelf space in, say, Aldi or IGA, etc., that is being taken up by Woolworths branded products. Oh, not branded, owned by Woolworths products. It's one of the insidious things about grocery stores over here. There's a lot of people think that they're doing this masterful boycotting of Woolworths by shopping at Coles or something like that, and then they go and they get like fucking Black and Gold or the Great Value something or other, which are all made by this one fucking like net grocer company, and they're literally just rebranded to like the Great Value equivalent for that store.
Yeah, I mean, that's a common tactic that they use. I mean, Coles and Woolworths own most of the pubs in Perth as well.
Yes.
But what happens is, they didn't build those pubs. They just bought them. And when they bought them, they kept the name the same, Like, they're not going to go and call it a Thirsty Camel or whatever. They keep the original name, and so they make you think that it's still a locally owned and operated pub, even though it's Coles or Woolies.
Yeah. No, I've seen that happen in real time. There was a pub owned by an old English couple, and they just wanted to get out. So they were like, oh, we're looking to sell. And then they got literally like blindsided with a 150% of market price offer from fucking AGH Group, which is Woolworths.
Right. Well, anyway, Bobcat had turned up with Andrew Wilkie. They were both wearing pig costumes. They liked doing, they were dressed up like pigs. So they were supposed to represent the duopoly between Coles and Woolworths, and they came in with they held a trough in their hands, and the trough had money in it, and they had their snouts in the trough. So pretty obvious symbolism there. Sometimes they like to do this. Bobcat has done parody songs and stuff before as well.
Yeah.
It's
again,
crossbenchers who do this stuff.
You have to ask yourself a question: pharmaceutically induced fever dream or Bobcat a political campaign? Sometimes the answer is not quite so clear.
Yeah, I mean, back when Nick Xenophon was around, he used to do stuff like this. I always find it's the independents, or those from very small parties, like Qatar Australia.
Well, they have to get attention somehow.
Yeah. But anyway, what they were talking about was, in terms of how can the government respond to this, they're talking about divestiture powers. And that means, the government actually flexing its muscles and intervening in the market and trying to break up the duopoly. In a similar way that, say, Microsoft was broken up in America.
Yep.
Now, when Albo was asked about this, because, of course, the government is doing an inquiry at the moment into practices like price gouging, being headed by Craig Emerson, Albo said that he did not want to go and use powers that he considered to be draconian. In fact, he said, we run a market economy here in Australia, and we do not run a command Soviet-style economy. So Albo was actually doing my free markets argument there, saying, hey, what, you think I'm a communist or something? I'm never going to do that. Well...
No, I just question your sexuality.
Okay, even though he's getting married. But
he went to a Taylor Swift concert as a man, a grown-ass man.
Did he? He went to that... Oh, man.
He went to Albanese, went to the fucking Taylor Swift concert. They're putting fucking videos of it around on Twitter.
Oh, okay, I missed that. Despite the fact I always followed politics, I still missed that. The girl at my work who went to 2 of the shows, she flew over to Melbourne, I think it was, to see it.
Christ.
She spent an absolute shitload of money on the whole thing, but she said it's all totally worth it. Anyway, what am I saying? Okay, yes, so Albo doesn't want to do it. Now, Bob Catter and Andrew Wilkie, of course, sort of arguable, Wilkie's definitely on the left. He's used to be a member of the Greens Party. Catter is a very interesting one. You could perhaps even say Catter is a third positionist type because he hates the fact that agriculture was deregulated in Australia. He thinks that was sinful from when it started with Hawke and Keating. But on the national side, you'd be fairly hard-pressed, I guess, to call the Nationals left-wing, even though they are less market-oriented than the Liberal Party. But David Littleproud was saying that, well, if those powers are there, and if we do see evidence of price gouging, or at the very least, not passing savings on to consumers when you have record profits being made, that the government has a role, therefore, to come in and should flex its muscles and break up the big 2. I don't know. Where do you stand on this, Nolsey? Should we do that?
Again, I think just we should. Is it a long-term bandage effect? No. Look what happened to fucking Microsoft. They broke it up, and then it basically slowly and steadily rebuilt what it was broken up into.
Oh yeah, I mean, companies always find ways to kind of to get around it. So, my phone going off.
That's a nice little alarm.
It's no, it's my ringtone.
It's your ringtone.
I've always got like a balls out metal song as my ringtone on my phone.
Oh man.
Always have, always will. So, Jesus, that threw me off. No, I mean, the real problem, I mean, again, like what a surprise, I'm going to say immigration, obviously, is fueling this. And, you know, groceries are necessities. Obviously, people need to eat. So it's hard to kind of, boycott the two of them, unless you just want to eternally go to farmers markets and whatnot and just eternally inconvenience yourself, you know.
And just get galaddied left, right, and center.
So people have to keep spending their money, and to a large extent, they have to keep spending their money at Coles and Woolworths. Otherwise, they just go broke. So, the problems we have at the moment is basically we've got too many consumers packed in to an economy that can't even house them right now. And obviously that is going to push prices up. So, yeah, I mean, divestiture powers might be good as a short-term measure, but would they actually have long-standing effects? Hell no. And it's one of those secondary solutions when we should be actually looking at the issue at its core. All right. So, talking about housing, it looks like the Greens are still going to be voting against the government's housing package. So, or at least these particular raft of reforms that we've got, which is to do with the government's help to buy scheme, which is basically where the government would pay a portion of your deposit, and then the government has therefore a part owner in your house. So the government is, the Greens are saying that while they don't see that in and of itself as a bad idea, they say it doesn't go too far. Doesn't go far enough, and they want the government to abolish negative gearing completely, and to cap rent increases, and to build more public housing. So they're basically saying, give us those three things, or we're not going to vote on this. On the other side of the political aisle, you've got the coalition who are just saying that no, this is government paternalism in the housing market, and they don't want to support it either. So it all depends then on the Teals, I guess. Now, it could get through the lower house. They could probably do that. But the Greens, as we know, have a very, very strong presence in the Senate. So, yeah, this could be dead on arrival, essentially. And, but look, is this actually going to make the housing crisis in Australia worse? I don't think so.
No.
That's already happening. There's just so many reverberating effects of builders going bust, of people not being able to afford a house because they've been priced out of the market. As I said last week, there is this massive, massive gap between the price of houses and the price of apartments, showing that the reason why houses are so expensive but apartments are not is because there is still a very, very high demand for houses, but there's not enough of them. So people are being forced into apartments simply because they can't afford anything better.
Yep.
Yeah, that's why I say no. This is not like a democratic process of urbanizing Australia.
I saw a spacious house, and the marketing as a house, and it was only like 150 square meters. It was like an alleyway with a bed.
Oh yeah, and I mean, also, like, you get subdivided houses where that's basically you build a house in someone else's backyard. And so you've now made that plot of land 2 plots of land. You just split them in half. I used to live in one. And I felt very claustrophobic in that.
Get in the bug pod, buddy.
No, fuck that. But yeah, we all are getting forced into the pod where we'll have to eat bugs and you will own nothing. But apparently you'll still be happy.
Fucking Christ.
All right, on to IR. So the Transport Workers Union, which we're told is one of the country's most powerful unions, is set to take advantage straight off of the government's recent IR reforms. So that, of course, meant things like extra rights for gig workers, the power to ignore your boss after hours, and even have them disciplined at Fair Work Australia. But what the TWU is doing is seeking leave and superannuation rights for gig workers, and a multi-employer bargaining agreement with aviation bosses. And this is all to do with, the recent reform. It has allowed the TWU to factor these changes into the agreements that they make with employers. So this was reported in the Australian as like kind of a blatant power grab by the TWU, saying that they're exploiting all these new laws. Well, it's like, what else did you expect them to do? I mean, they were one of the bodies that were campaigning for these changes in the first place. Now they've got them. You know, they would be crazy to betray their members and not actually use those changes as leverage when they create a new agreement. So I'm not.
So you were expecting them to be ineffectual and do nothing after all this like campaigning and lawmaking. You do realize they're not politicians like you, right?
Yeah, and how much money would they be donating as well to the Labor Party and to other funds? Yeah. The union movement is still, I believe, primarily what funds the Labor Party the most.
Yeah.
This would include new pay deals for new pay deals for public sector workers, increased rights to work from home. I saw Andrew Bolt actually railing against this the other day, saying that the right to work from home is it is not a right. It shouldn't be held as a right. Well, the thing is, like negotiating a degree of flexibility with your employer, that's a right, and that can include working from home. And I've never liked the idea of exclusively working from home, because you will be an absolute hermit. You'll be socially isolated. However, working from home does do things like cut out commute times and, gives you that extra time to, say, go and pick the kids up from school and that kind of thing. So it still can be pro-social, if you know what I mean, in those kind of ways. Even if you're not, say, working with your colleagues for the day. It can be social in other ways. So, yeah, I don't see anything wrong with that either, with negotiating more time working at home, as long as it's reasonable. I have no problem with that. Okay. So just a quick story here. You can watch a new Four Corners episode. I'm amazed that they did this, actually. But they actually profiled two men who were convicted in absentia, meaning they weren't in the country at the time, for Rwanda's genocide that occurred in the 90s.
What?
Yeah. So these men are in Australia now.
Okay.
So, you had the majority Hutus murder the Tutsis. Right. It's actually quite amazing what they did. It was around 500,000 people that were killed in about 3 months. And it was mainly done with knives and machetes and stuff, not with guns. Like, they were literally slicing each other up.
Hacking and slashing.
So two of the men involved in orchestrating that genocide actually freely roam here in Australia, despite the fact that they have these outstanding convictions and therefore, warrants for their arrest in Rwanda. And it looks like Four Corners has done a better job at tracking them down than anyone else. So this is one example, I
Just so
guess,
fucking
of
weird to think about.
the fact that
Like,
Four
it's just
Corners.
weird to think about the. Oh my fucking god! Do we have a slight delay between us?
I don't know what is weird to think about.
It's weird to think about the fact that we got like these acts or knife murdering sociopaths in this country, and it took a fucking media outlet to fucking hunt them down. That's weird to think about. The fact that, like, you know, for how many years we've been living around people who literally killed people to death with, like, fucking stabbed people to death with knives.
Yeah, and by the way, the Rwandan genocide was 30 years ago now.
Yeah.
So obviously these guys have been walking free like ever since then, and the law has done a very bad job at catching up with them. But I mean, look, I'd also say that, like, you know, the ABC is just trying to say, oh, well, look, we are still opposed to illegal and immoral immigration when it comes to guys like this. But, you know, the truth is, I wouldn't say these guys would be any more or less violent than any other African in Australia at the moment. They would be just as much risk as any other, because that's what Africans are like. And I mean, a lot of the ones that we get, very often they had been like child soldiers and all of that. So they're hardened killers from a very young age. And we accept them into Australia as refugees because they come from these shithole war-torn countries where they were child soldiers. And then we expect them to just integrate as if nothing happened. And then we're surprised when they go and stab all women to death. All right. So let's move on to Aboriginal news here.
Yes.
So this guy in the town, the West Australian town of TRWOE, he has been accused of disrupting an Indigenous rainbow serpent dreaming site. Okay. The Indigenous rainbow serpent is not like an existing, like, recognized snake or something, if that's what it sounds like to you. It's a spiritual entity in the Aboriginal dreaming, which is, their so-called religion, which no one has ever really been able to.
When you're halfway down a K-hole.
I mean, yeah, like, I still haven't ever heard like a proper explanation of what the dreaming is exactly. I mean, like, it's pretty easy to explain Christianity to someone. Try explaining the dreaming, though. Like, you'll never get a proper answer on that.
I've got a pretty concise explanation for you. It's dehydration induced delirium.
Yeah, well, look, you could say the same about all the Abrahamic religions too, couldn't you? I mean, didn't Muhammad get his revelations when he was fasting in the desert? I mean, that's going to induce some pretty trippy hallucinations too, I'd imagine. Anyway, we won't get into that debate. What this guy did, he constructed a waterway crossing on his property. And because of the fact that he is on sacred dreaming land, right? In other words, a piece of land that is said to have cultural significance to Australian Aborigines. Apparently, he should have sought permission for doing this first, even though it is his own property where he made this construction. So he's going to argue that he was only repairing an existing structure, and the works returned the flow of water closer to the original state. So in other words, he improved it. He improved the land that they were on. Nonetheless, they are charging him under the existing Aboriginal Heritage Act. And remember, we scrapped the new one, the NEO Australian Heritage Act, because it was just way too far. It was really draconian. It was going to punish farmers, and you basically, like what he was expected to do here, you would have to get permission for like the most minor of development on your farm or whatever it is that you owned. And so it was actually controversial enough for the WA state government to scrap it. Nonetheless, there is still a lot of bullshit left over in the existing act. And that's what we've got here. This guy who constructed a waterway on his own land is said that he upset the Indigenous rainbow serpent. Okay.
Yep.
So we'll wait and see what happens here. He's just an old guy who lives in 2J, who's 71 years old. And they want to rake him over the coals for upsetting the rainbow serpent.
The fucking course. It literally is like, what's the purpose of these laws? Is it to like preserve Aboriginal culture? What culture? Is it like, keeping works and etc. going, or like keeping areas stable, stopping them from becoming like agricultural shit pits? No, because you can pay them and they'll allow you to do that anyway. No, it's just to punish you. And it's probably better that you're some like fucking old white dude. Someone's getting their jimmies off to this, by the way. Someone is. I guarantee you.
Yeah, would you expect anything else?
No, I wouldn't.
All right, so just a couple of quick stories to finish off A news. That is, when it comes to the alcohol restrictions that exist in the Northern Territory, and in particular Alice Springs, you do always have various groups who don't like them. And what you have going on in the Northern Territory, you have the lobby, which is the Tourism Central Australia. So they're calling on all of those laws to be turned back around. So what they have is 2 dry days per week and limited trading hours as well. So it used to be that you could just buy a piss whenever you wanted. Now 2 dry days, which I believe one of them is a Tuesday, because that's Dole Day. So that's a good idea, I think. And remember, these laws were put back into effect after you had riots in Alice Springs and a massive surge in crime that was going on over there. Albo then actually flew to Darwin and spoke to Natasha Files, the then chief minister, and basically convinced her, no, you've got to go back and you've got to implement all these old laws again, because we're trying to sell the voice here, and Abos are running wild. They're running absolutely wild.
You gotta keep it calm down on the farm. We got these wily buck motherfuckers running buck wild and destroying our PR campaign.
So that naturally means that people who sell alcohol, of course, aren't happy and reduce trading hours. Means fewer profits for them. But Tourism Central Australia, they're saying that tourism in Alice Springs has declined up to 50%. They said that the 2023 tourist season declined up to 50% compared to the year before. So
I wonder why.
but the thing is here, hold on, is that, but they're trying to blame it simply on the alcohol restrictions. I would look at it the other way around and say, no, it's because of rampaging abos, actually. And how is it that you stop them from being rampaging abos? Well, you have to restrict their supply of alcohol, So look, I don't know if you're going.
Yeah, if you're going to the fucking Northern Territory or like really like Alice Springs or wherever in that area, you're an Australian citizen. You are like someone who lives here. And coming up to that period, all you saw on television, much to the chagrin of Albanese and etc., was literal fucking bum fights in the street. People like fucking ransacking stores, stabbing each other. There was that one alcohol clerk who got stabbed to death. Yeah. So what's going to be? It's not because you can't go and buy piss at the fucking corner. No, it's because you're scared you're going to get fucking stabbed on the way to go buy piss on the corner. Fucking insane. But by the way, like fucking, if you're not from Australia, do not fucking go to the Northern Territory. There's literally nothing there for you. Just go to like one of the fucking coastal cities.
You're not even allowed to walk on Ayers Rock anymore, or Uluru. as they call it. And again, it's because of upsetting Aboriginal spirits. There's only one spirit they care about.
Yeah, no, when we take power, I'm going to erect a 150-foot tall Captain Cook and just use the fucking, use Ayers Rock as a plinth.
No, absolutely. That would have to be one of the things that we claim back,
Yes.
Ayers Rock was never meant a bloody thing to them.
No.
We actually recognise it as a natural wonder. Of course it is. That's all it was. We want to get enough control so we can actually stop Whitey from enjoying it and walking on it.
Yep. Man, I do love the Indigenous Australian. Oh, to be honest, it's not them. It's, whatever master's pulling the strings behind it because they don't have enough agency to self-start when it comes to these issues. But, yeah, like I sure do love they have a reasonable and scaled response to everything, right?
Oh, absolutely. So the last story, just quickly, the election for the Aboriginal voice to Parliament in South Australia is coming up very soon. So, so the candidates have been formally unveiled. There are 113 nominees. So they're going to seek election to 46 regional positions, with 12 of the successful candidates forming the South Australian voice. So the counting for that will happen March 25, so about a month away. And yeah,
let's see how quickly it gets shit canned.
Well, yeah. Let's see how it actually goes. Whether it has any teeth, whether it really actually has some influence, or if it's just all symbolic. We don't know.
We shall see.
We'll see, and we'll report on it at the time, I'm sure. So, okay. So, Nolsey, do you have a hot take on these two homosexuals who were murdered?
Yeah, which ones?
So one of them was, what's his name? Is it Julian Baird? I'm sorry, I didn't put much prep into this. I'm just going from, Jesse Baird. You know what I'm talking about?
Gay cop. I'm sorry, it's opening the link now. What is going on here?
Did you not see this in the news?
No, I did not.
Well,
gay cop charged with murdering journalist ex-partner and his new Qantas flight attendant boyfriend.
Never heard of it.
Jesus fucking Christ.
Yeah, so this was a tale regarding 3 homosexuals. So one of them is Jesse Baird, who was actually a news presenter for Channel 10. Like I was watching like a few clips. I'd never seen him before, but yeah, he was like, you could say a minor celebrity, I guess. He was known.
Yeah, this guy is taking the meaning of total twink deaf and adding some spice to it.
Yeah.
Holy Jesus, buddy.
So Jesse Baird, why do I keep losing my... Sorry, I keep losing track of the tabs I'm clicking here. So, he was he had a new lover. It was a 29-year-old Qantas flight attendant, Luke Davies. Okay, so they were actually a couple. They did the whole your life and photos thing where they were constantly, updating their Instagram or whatever it was they had. I saw these photos where they seemed to be living like a real kind of luxury lifestyle, going to all the expensive spots around the world. And I guess they would have had the money behind it, not for being a flight attendant, but, for being a minor celebrity on Channel 10. Now, apparently, Jesse Baird had what was referred to as an encounter with Beau Lemire Condon. Yes, that's his name.
What?
Yeah. Beau Lemire Condon, who is a police officer. Well, he was a police officer. Also homosexual. It was originally reported that they were boyfriend and boyfriend, that they were a couple.
That doesn't really mean much with gays.
Well, no, it doesn't. And also, the people who were friends with Jesse Baird said later on, no, they were not a couple, and that they had merely had an encounter. I think we all know what that means. So anyway, yeah. So this guy, Beau Lamar Condon, actually used his police-issued gun that he had at home with him, and he went to a residence of Jesse Baird and killed him, shot him with that gun, and also killed Luke Davies.
What?
Let me just let this cat out 1 sec.
No, that effeminate man, that homosexual man, had him in a self-defense situation. He'd trained in the police academy for this. He'd gone to the academy, and they strictly said that, if you're ever cornered or feel threatened by a homosexual man, you just need a mag dump right into his face. Oh, God. What the fuck story is this?
Okay, so this guy, this cop, Beau, let's just call him Beau, that's easier. He was said to, he did a similar sort of like life by Instagram thing where he was constantly posting lavish photos of himself online and everything. He was also said to have been driving very expensive cars, despite the fact he's just a cop. He, just earned an average wage. So speculation has kind of been going as to how he afforded, how to live such an expensive lifestyle so lavishly like that. And one of the rumors is that he was actually a male escort on the side. So he had two jobs. Now, I must point out here that some people are claiming this is fake, that this might have been like deep fake edits that people had made after the fact. I don't know. Like, either one would not surprise me, I don't think. I can certainly see this guy being an escort, but at the same time, I can see people wanting to add to the drama here and, do some deep fakes, whatever it is. I'm not sure what it is. But anyway, the outcome of all of this sordid tale, is that police have been asked not to attend the Gay and Lesbian Mardi Gras, which is that this weekend? Yep. It's coming up anyway. So they were asked not to turn up. Now apparently they're saying, no, it's okay. Cops can turn up, but we're asking that you don't wear your uniform. You just have to sort of blend in other ways. But they don't want the police to be represented, as a body in the parade. Which is interesting because it seems like they're saying, oh, well, this is a protest against homophobic violence from the police, so therefore we don't think you guys should be represented here. But it's like, guys, he was gay as well. Yes, it was a cop, but it was a gay cop. So that doesn't make much sense. I'm sorry. This is an example.
Here's the kind of condom that you needed protection from. That's a show title.
I don't know if we'll get away with that one. But it looks like now the theory that the cops are going with is that this other guy, Luke Davies, the guy who was the flight attendant, apparently Beau Condon didn't want to kill him, but it was much like, with the O.J. Simpson, when he killed what's her name, Nicole Brown, and you had the Jewish guy who was with her at the time. I forget his name. But he was killed as well. Like, police don't think that he intended originally to kill him. It was just the fact that he was in the wrong place at the wrong time. It looks like that's the case here. And the reason why is because initially, before this guy went out to kill Jesse Baird, he went and bought a surfboard bag so that he could put him in that bag and hide the body. They then said that after he went and shot both of them, he purchased an additional surfboard bag so that he could then dispose of two bodies.
Yeah, there we
go. I'm surprised you didn't hear about this, Nolsey.
Fucking slipped
that's the working theory at the moment. Now, Now, you might notice that, like, I've been able to give a bit of detail here on what exactly, has been going on in this case. And this is actually something that the police commissioner in New South Wales has been criticised for, because usually when you have, like, a case here, which is a double murder, obviously there is going to be a criminal trial coming up and where a jury is likely to be sitting. And generally speaking, you try not to let too much information get out into the public because you may prejudice the jury, obviously. And particularly for high-profile cases, which this obviously is, there's even more of a need to sort of control the information, to stop the media from getting their hands on it. But it seems like New South Wales police have done the exact opposite here. Like I just gave the detail away on, like, their theory as to what exactly Beau had premeditated. So
yeah, it was this just a bizarre effort at, like, PR control?
I think it might have been, yeah. I mean, like, I think they're really trying the best they can to make this not look like a, like, cop on gay violence, like New South Wales police versus the LGBT community. They very much want to point out that this was like a bit of homosexual bitch fighting that was going on that led to this. However it happened, I don't know. But
it's fucking insane, that's for sure.
Quite possibly drugs, jealousy, sexual drama of various kinds was involved here. And it made this guy go and shoot these two with his police-issued gun.
The not-so-safe condom.
No. Okay, so some other crime news here. And then we do have another story on homosexuals. So, in Townsville and also generally in Queensland, they are seeing a further reduction in youth crime. So this has resulted, for example, in a 53% reduction in robbery, car theft, and burglary rates. And this came after the implementation of Task Force Guardian. So this is a roving police operation that pairs officers with youth justice workers to run patrols, bail checks, and investigations. But it's also just basically means it's a tough on crime approach as well. They're actively going out and seeking people who are breaching bail conditions or just skipping bail altogether and punishing them for it. Because remember, up until recently, skipping bail was not even a criminal offence for juveniles. It was for adults, but not for juveniles. So ever since Labor put that law back into place, and we've had Task Force Guardian, and we've just generally had more police patrols that have allowed them to crack down on repeat offenders and those skipping bail. Well, what do you know? The numbers are actually working out here. So car theft by use went down 44.3%. Unlawful entry with intent dropped by 30.04%. And robbery plunged by nearly 54%. So there you go.
And we can do a whole lot better by just deporting them back to Africa.
We can. A sizable number of this stuff is Aboriginal crime, though, and we can't exactly deport them.
India.
Yeah, perhaps. But yeah, I mean, obviously the first solution is not to let these people in the first place. And then once we've dealt with them, well, we just have a tough on crime approach to the Aborigines who unfortunately have to stay here. But yeah, I mean, look, every time we read out anything to do with crime numbers going down, it's always to do with something like this. And then when it's crime going up, it's to do with them relaxing laws every single time. Yep. You know, how many
almost like we're like in this perpetual state where like there's always a disadvantaged youth hanging around the corner ready to bust in your fucking front door.
There is. And dare I say, it's also because ever since like the widespread media coverage of that stabbing, it obviously caused community outrage and a lot of media coverage. I think that's just scared them as well, you know. They kind of think everyone is watching them now because of the increased attention. Now, at the same time,
presence of a cricket bat.
Over in the Northern Territory, you've got the Labor Attorney General, Chancey Paik, who said that locking up children does not work. And he is proud of lifting the criminal age of responsibility there. I believe they increased it from 10 to 12. And yeah, by the way, the Northern Territory government does have closing Dondale, which is the youth prison there. That is actually one of their policies. They're not giving a solid timeline on when that's going to happen, but they are going to close it. And it's their only one, right? Now, that doesn't mean there'll be no such thing as youth detention. They'll just build another one, right? But I've never seen the purpose of this. Like, they want to do the same thing in WA, like close down Banksia Hill and then open another one. What's the point? Can't you just actually just reform the existing one you have?
No, because then it will look like we'll be actually doing something and not making it look like we're actually doing something.
Of course. And, you know, they're still not allowed in Dondale to use things like spit hoods. And, you know, you can give someone like a serious disease just by spitting on them. And believe me, a lot of those detainees carry those diseases. And yeah, if you do spit on someone's face, you can give it to them. You can fucking do that. So it just seems common sense to me that, yeah, if they're doing that, or biting, because that's sometimes they do that as well.
Yes,
spit
they're
was
ferals.
the best thing to actually prevent them from doing it. All right. So the other story on homosexuals here. This came from a councillor here in WA in our regional town of Albany. A guy called Thomas Brough, or Brough, I think, sorry. Yeah, Thomas Brough. I've got to read the way the ABC worded this. So here's what they said. Albany councillor Thomas Brough falsely claimed pedophiles were welcomed in the LGBTQIA plus community. That's what they've written there. So, falsely claiming it. Now, what he was saying here was, unfortunately, he still had the usual disclaimers like, I don't care what people get up to in the bedroom and all of that. But he said that it is a fact that MAPS, minor attracted persons, are invited into and do participate in LGBT activities like pride marches, which is absolutely true. Okay?
It is true.
Now I'm going to stop short of exactly, calling this guy based or whatever. And the reason is very simple. He is a member of the Liberal Party. So he's just, apparently one of the far right, hard right conservatives in the Liberal Party. And it has been reported that he was actually seeking or wanted to seek pre-selection to sit in the WA Parliament. Well, I think we can safely say he's blown that chance. But for that, I'll give him credit. He took a genuine risk, and yes, he probably has self-sabotaged a career with the Liberal Party. Perhaps not altogether. I mean, I would argue that given this, he could run probably quite successfully as an independent. But yeah, he's got no hope of running for the Liberal Party now. I think that's pretty fair to say.
Fuck no.
But yeah, this was...
He's chosen the gayest party to run for.
If you've got WA set as your location on the ABC News website, this was actually the number one story yesterday. And I just love the way they framed it here, interviewing fucking freaks that they had in Albany, because, they're increasingly running these pride events in regional towns now as well. You can't escape, and Albany is like about as regional as it gets, by the way, in WA. It is way, way away from Perth. And actually, hold on, let me read out what this guy said. So this was, this guy's name is Tiger Bird. He said,
what?
Yeah, he was one of the organisers of the Albany Pride March. Oh no, sorry, Albany Pride Festival. He said, frankly, it's laughable and it's just ridiculous. And the fact that in 2024, the current year is in the first sentence, we are still rehashing antiquated nonsense is frankly astounding. The plus doesn't, despite his claims, include minor attracted people. Well, there's been accounts on Twitter that have actually said that maps are welcome. NAMBLA, the North American Man-Boy Love Association, has openly said that they consider themselves to be part of the LGBT movement, and they have been noted to have participated in things like pride marches. They have had
show me the gay leader, and I'll show you the fucking pedophilia. It's quite literally just a matter of looking into it with most of them.
Right, and you still can find a range of studies. Unfortunately, they're not being done anymore. But if you look at studies done in like the 90s and the early 2000s, you can find where they tackled this question of do homosexuals have a higher likelihood of being molested as children? And those studies all say yes. Okay.
It may not be the Ramrods debacle.
Yeah, it may not be the only cause of homosexuality, but it's certainly a leading cause. It's definitely true.
Yep.
But this was all just presented as complete, just total falsehood by the ABC.
Again, if it's not taken seriously or not, if it's treated like a pants on head conspiracy, they don't actually have to delve into it. So at no point during this thing will they actually like materially look to see if that claim is true or not. Because everyone knows the fucking answer.
Right. And I mean, look, they ABC tracked this guy down for an interview, and he doubled down. So you said here, people are rightly concerned about some of the people who come into that coalition. I'm not interested in what people get up to in the bedroom. It's none of my business. However, incorporation of people who are adults sexually attracted to children, minor attracted persons, is a cause for concern if you're adding them into a coalition. Yeah, he's completely right. I can't see anything inaccurate about that. If anything, he just doesn't go far enough here. You know, he's still pretty careful to couch his language in very careful terms, but he's right still.
Yeah.
Okay. So, bulk billing rates, we're moving to health now, are falling in WA. So people who do not have concession cards are finding it harder and harder to find a doctor that will bulk bill them. So usually that sets you back about $80, I believe, for a standard appointment. A lot of the time, it's a weird like luck of the draw thing. Sometimes the doctor will choose to bulk bill you. Sometimes he won't. I don't really get how all of that works, but that's the way it is. And apparently, even children and concession card holders are finding it harder and harder as well to find a clinic. So, yeah, the government says that they are working on this. There are policies that was introduced in November that apparently is already improving. They said it's improving bulk billing rates, but the new data is not showing that. It showed that it declined in 2023 and it's still declining. So. Okay, now the nation's health insurers are saying that Labor is deliberately delaying their decision on how much to increase premiums for millions of Australians with private health cover. They're saying that they're doing this on purpose because the Dunkley by-election is coming up. They don't want it to sour. That also gives the impression that they're going to increase those premiums by a lot, and they don't want to piss people off too much.
Yeah.
Not when you're going into an election, you don't want to do that. So Mark Butler is our health minister. He rejected those claims. He said he had been forced to ask the health funds to resubmit their proposals for price changes in December and in late January. And that was in consideration of their, quote, years of record profits and the declining proportion of premiums they return to customers. He said, with household budgets under pressure, it's important to make sure that any increases are adequately justified and as low as possible. Okay, well, apparently this is the biggest delay in that decision-making process in 15 years. I don't know. 15 years is actually not all that long. So,
Yeah.
I'm not sure. But hey, government playing politics right before an election, who would have thought?
Completely unheard of. It's just a bad sign of things to come.
All right, now, for everyone who was upset about the vaccine mandates that we had back in, peak COVID, there's a bit of a legal win that occurred here. So this was to do with not exactly a class action, but an action that was taken by a number of Queensland paramedics and police. They took on the state government and the vaccine mandates, of course, basically saying you have to get double jabbed, at least double jabbed, or you can't work as a copper or as a paramedic. So Judge Glenn Martin ruled on Tuesday that the Police Commissioner Katrina Carroll's December 2021 directive for all staff to be vaccinated was unlawful under the Human Rights Act. He also ruled a mandatory vaccine order for paramedics made by former Queensland Health Director John Wakefield in January 2022 was of no effect. So it had no legal bearing whatsoever.
No.
So that means that these two individuals, the Police Commissioner and the Queensland Health Director, are barred from taking any form of disciplinary action against the 74 complainants. So those 74 complainants, of course, making up the paramedics and police who took the government to court over this. So, you would now expect, considering that the court has ruled that these vaccine mandates were not legal in the first place, that the people who were affected here, perhaps they lost their job, would be entitled to compensation. So that's going to open that up for them. So that's a fairly big win.
Yeah,
that's pretty big win.
I was thinking that at the time, but just me being incredibly cynical, I was like, this really isn't legal. Like what they're doing, what they're saying right now, etc. And even how they were making it pretty damn black and white, what was happening, at least on paper and in presentation. Me being cynical is just like, well, but nothing's going to come of this. It's definitely not legal, but nothing will come. Maybe I was wrong. Definitely seeing the exact opposite happening.
Further down the track.
And they fucking deserve it.
Yeah. No, it was bullshit. Like, I wasn't as hardcore with the whole COVID stuff as a lot of people, but I definitely oppose the mandates. And I did not get vaccinated myself. At all. I am unjabbed, pure blood.
Lock and load, this dude doesn't even need zinc pills.
So, quickly on the NDIS, there was a expose done by Four Corners, and this was on the treatment of children with autism. And if you have a look at some of the footage that they got, it was, they put some of the children in rooms with no windows in order to punish them. And there was footage of a restraint where they had this one kid on the floor being restrained by 6 staff members, actually. And it was found that action was illegal. They had no right to do that to that child. As a result of that, the Tracy Mackey, who is the NDIS Quality and Safeguards Commissioner, in other words, the Commissioner of the NDIS, has actually announced her resignation. So, and that came right after that report happened as well. Now, what's funny about this, not funny, was that she actually told, that is, Tracy Mackey told the ABC that particular program that the NDIS was funding was stopped. And she even told Bill Shorten, who was the NDIS minister, that it had stopped. Four Corners were contacted later by other staff from the NDIS showing that it had not stopped. It was still actually operational. And even Bill Shorten was caught offside by that because his understanding, because the commissioner told him so, was that simply it had been stopped. and that wasn't true. So it would be pretty hard for Tracy Mackey to survive after having that much of a pretty shit run of PR for her. Okay. Quickly in Queensland, the Attorney General says she's not contesting the next election. That is Yvette Darth. She said Anastasia Palaszczuk's resignation didn't play a factor in that. Others disagree because they said that they were kind of close friends and also factional allies. So yeah, one less. But she's going to serve out her term until the election, so there won't be a by-election in Redcliffe. Okay, now let's go to WA. This was honestly the only bit of state politics this week that I thought was interesting. So the WA Liberal Party, which only has 3 members in the lower house, their deputy leader, Steve Thomas, has been forced to resign the deputy leadership, right? So, and I mean, once you do that, you've got 3 members of parliament. You don't exactly have much choice then, do you? There's not many alternatives if your deputy leader has to resign. But anyway, the reason he did was because apparently he was trying to use Brian Burke as a middleman to arrange a business meeting. Now, those who don't know, Brian Burke is a former premier of WA who had to resign in disgrace because of what was called the WA Inc. fiasco. I won't go into it. Basically, he's just a corrupt politician, who was doing a lot of favours behind closed doors. And when he left politics, he continued to do so. He continued to work as a lobbyist and got involved in a lot of, corrupt conduct. They tried to sort of link Brian Burke to Kevin Rudd back in 2006, 2007, because Brian Burke got back into the media spotlight around that time due to some dodgy dealings he had with WA politicians like Norm Marlborough. So anyway, basically, Brian Burke bad, right? If you're caught talking to Brian Burke in any capacity. Oh, actually, I'll give an example that people might remember of. It's much more recent, was Barry O'Farrell. He received an expensive bottle of wine from Brian Burke, and then he had to resign.
And got fucked on it.
Yeah, because he originally said, no, I never received anything. Then, the receipts or whatever were produced. And then he resigned the next day. So, as you can tell, Brian Burke, absolutely toxic. You do not want to get caught talking to the guy. So he had to resign the deputy leadership, that is Steve Thomas, in the WA Libs. But then, get this, the logical replacement, that is the person who was going to take over then as deputy leader, was going to be this guy called Tjorn Sibner, who I think is of Scandinavian descent, I'm not too sure. Well, guess what? He was also involved in an email correspondence with Brian Burke. So the guy who they thought was a logical successor has actually been caught doing the exact same thing, talking to Brian Burke. So they don't know. They're just they're literally running out of people now because they've got so few people in the parliament. They don't know who they're going to go with. Now, further to that, when we're talking about the next election and the people who they want to put into power there, they're talking about people like Hayley Cormann, who is the wife of Matthias Cormann, who was the former finance minister. The guy who likened himself to Arnold Schwarzenegger. He comes from the German-speaking part of Belgium. So anyway, apparently the factions have mobilized against her now and are working against her bid for pre-selection to get into the party. Now, all of this going on at the moment, it basically means that Basil Zemplers, who is not even in the parliament at the moment, is basically guaranteed to become leader of the Liberal Party. Okay?
Oh, Jesus fucking Christ.
I mean, I even have trouble remembering who Libby Mettam is sometimes. She's the leader of the WA Liberals. She has no media traction, basically, whatsoever. And because of the fact that they are in such a pitiful number in the WA Parliament
They're
right
a
now,
non-party here.
yeah, well, the Liberal, yeah, basically. The Liberal Party has probably already written off the next election. You know, they know that they're going to lose it. And basically, they're going for a more long-term strategy where they're thinking about the election after. And so that, of course, means installing Basil Zemplis as opposition leader and then winning that election further down the track. That's basically the...
You just need to make sure to ruin that election for them as well.
Yeah. So look, Basil Zemplis, just quickly, sports reporter guy. He's now Lord Mayor of Perth. If you live in Perth, you know who Basil Zemplis is. If you don't, you don't. He's like exclusively a WA celebrity. But yeah, considering all these, all this infighting and own goals, I guess you could call it, in the Liberal Party, Basil Zemplis now will be going for a pre-selection in the seat of Churchlands, which, even though it's held by Labor right now, it's still kind of considered to be blue ribbon, still considered to be a safe Liberal Party seat. And it's understood that it's uncontested. He will be the only one going for it, but he still has to go through the whole pre-selection process as a formality. So yeah, I think without a doubt he's going to get elected into Parliament. He'll then take over the leadership, and quite possibly he could be Premier of WA further down the road.
That's
okay.
Shit.
Yes.
That's incredibly shit.
Yeah, that is a sad thought, the idea of Basil Zemplis as our Premier.
Oh, fuck.
Okay. Barnaby Joyce has actually taken a week off work. So there were a lot of calls, including public calls by his leader, David Littleproud, for him to take personal leave to kind of, get his shit together after he mixed booze and prescription medication and fell on the floor.
Dude, so what the fuck was going on? I know we talked about it last time, or I'm pretty sure we talked about it last time, but Jesus fucking Christ, that was... Oh, how the fuck do you have a career after that?
I bet he was really regretting not getting up. Why he fell there and then thought, I'll just lie here for a while. And
get on my phone and start cussing out my wife.
Yeah, that's a good idea, Barnaby. Anyway, he had previously said before, I don't take advice from people in Canberra. Well, on Monday, it was confirmed that he's taken a week off. Only 1 week, though, so it's not very long. And I doubt that's actually going to do him any good. He'll come back the same man he was.
Jesus
okay,
Christ.
Scott Morrison has left the Parliament. And John Howard, former Prime Minister, has said that he would be remembered kindly. And he cited his response to the pandemic and also the AUKUS agreement as his crowning achievements during his tenure. Don't know about that. I'm not going to go into AUKUS again, but I can tell why Howard thought AUKUS was such a great thing, because it was a military and strategic partnership with the UK and America. And people who remember the Howard era remember that,
oh God, fart sucking.
Yeah. Australia basically made us a vassal state of America, but also, really, really wanted to hold on to the idea of as Australia as a Commonwealth country and sort of like a subsidiary of the British. And, if you watch the Nemesis documentary or the miniseries on ABC, when they were interviewing John Howard, they had him in his office, and behind him you can see there's two flags intertwined. One of them is the Australian flag and the other is the British flag. And, the thing with Howard was that, he always just sort of seemed that, Australia derived its identity from the British and its current military partnership with the United States. It's like our identity was not unique in any way. It was simply bestowed to us by America and Britain. Like, there was no such thing as a unique Australian nationalism or identity. And that's one of the things I really hate about Howard,
Fucking damn it.
But anyway, Scott Morrison also, in his farewell speech, his valedictory speech, said that he was very concerned about the recent rise in anti-Semitism in Australia. So that was one piece of his parting words that he had to just throw in there was, let's get real on Australian anti-Semitism. Which, of course, is entirely left-wing if you watch Sky News. That's what they'll tell you.
Yeah. I'm just disappointed that I don't get my mention. I'm putting my days in, putting my hours in at the anti-Semitism mine, coming up with some gold, but no recognition.
Right. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the Dunkley by-election. So, as I said, the Labor government is sort of selling this as a referendum on the Stage 3 tax cuts and how they've amended them. The Liberal Party are responding by basically saying that the Labor Party wants to hit Australia with a series of new taxes, and they actually quantify this. They say there's going to be 9 new taxes. Now, here's what's causing them to make that estimation. If you look at the mid-year budget documents, show that since... Oh, sorry, am I reading the right thing here? Oh, yes. So it showed that since the 2022 pre-election economic and fiscal outlook, it is estimated the government will increase tax receipts by $378.8 billion over 5 years. That is over 2026 to 2027. But we have no detail on what exactly they're doing to get those tax receipts. Obviously, if you want to increase it by that amount, you've got to either impose new taxes or you've got to raise existing taxes. So that is why, of course, the coalition is saying, and rightly so, that these fuel efficiency standards are basically just going to mean extra taxes on cars and petrol. They're probably going to put up excise tax, as if petrol isn't already expensive enough. So yeah, that's the angle that the coalition is going with here. They're saying, okay, you might get some immediate relief, but it's only going to put about, $10 or so extra in your pocket every week. That's going to be eaten up by inflation anyway. And then you're going to be slugged with a whole bunch of environmental taxes further down the road. And I think they're right about that one.
Jesus Christ.
Okay, now, Colin Rubinstein, one of our eminent Jewish leaders, what's he from? AJAC, Australian Israel and Jewish Affairs Council. He is appalled by the fact that on the Dunkley how to vote cards for Labor are preferencing the Greens at number 2. So number 2 on their how to vote card. So Rubinstein said that various members of the Green Party have been engaging in open anti-Semitism. So I'll read what he said here. He said, while the ALP may traditionally preference the Greens, this should change in the face of the extremism and sometimes open anti-Semitism coming from Greens parliamentary representatives since October 7. Any party whose representatives speak of Jewish tentacles controlling society or shout the genocidal Hamas-linked demand from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, tantamount to the destruction of Israel, should be regarded as beyond the pale. So yeah,
I like how they have to fucking just emphasize tantamount to the destruction of Israel. It's like, Jesus fucking Christ. You had to preload that, didn't you?
Yeah. It looks a hell of a lot like the destruction of Gaza, from what I can see, actually. Right. Now, do you know who the Greens are actually running as a candidate in Dunkley? His name is Alex Breskin, and he's Jewish. All right. Now,
Whoa!
I'd be interested to know if the Greens did this on purpose, like if they're actually trying to fight against this, labeling them as a sort of left-wing anti-Semitic party because of their stance on Gaza. It's hard to say. But anyway, here is what Alex Breskin, the Greens candidate, had to say about it. He said, "I'm proud to be part of the growing crowd of Jewish voices calling for an end to Israel's genocide in Gaza and for Australia to stop supporting the invasion. It is beyond disappointing that a group that claims to represent Jewish people is encouraging a vote for right-wing groups with documented links to neo-Nazis, instead of a Jewish candidate for a party that proudly opposes anti-Semitism and racism in all its forms." So yeah, he's basically saying if you go and preference some of these other parties, you're preferencing neo-Nazis. Basically,
God damn, I wish
both
you were.
sides here are full of shit, I think. Unless you're talking Australia First, mate, or the Australian Protectionist Party, you're not going to get anything near that. So
No. Not even fucking close.
no. Okay. So Lydia Thorpe made a bit of a deal of herself in the Senate again the other day. This was one of these late night sessions where you've only got like bloody 5 people left in the chamber. She just kept interrupting. This was about 8:30, and kept talking over the president and kept accusing the deputy president of being asleep while she was trying to highlight Aboriginal issues. That then resulted in the chamber being adjourned early, basically because they couldn't shut her up, and she just kept going off her head the whole time. So, and I believe she's wearing this lapel that has the Aboriginal flag intertwined with the Palestinian flag at the moment.
Oh, God.
Can't
Gay brown
support
people
it.
pins.
Yeah.
There's a bunch of brown people I don't give a shit about.
All right, so Simon Birmingham, who is the opposition foreign affairs spokesman, he's urging Anthony Albanese to impose further sanctions on Russia and President Vladimir Putin. The reason why is because Joe Biden has just done that recently. And, they include things like personal sanctions, like, on bank accounts and that kind of thing. What the bloody hell for? This apparently is all in response to the political assassination, as they're calling it, of Alexei Navalny. Even though we, of course, have no hard evidence that Putin was involved in that. I don't know. I'm kind of agnostic on that issue at the moment. But it's silly. And, if you want to talk about diverting from the cost of living crisis that we've got going along, well, that's a pretty good thing to talk about. What the fuck do we care about this? Okay, and what Russia is doing and how they're managing their own internal domestic politics. We shouldn't give a shit about that.
No.
All right, so the guy behind the Medibank... oh, wait, no, sorry. Well, all right, I might as well just mention that one now. But the Russian who was said to be behind the 2022 Medibank hack that exposed the accounts of 9 million customers, apparently the Russians have arrested him. So,
all right.
It looks like these are to do with not anything to do with the crimes that he would have committed against Australians, but he was actually doing dirties in his own country. So the AFP has said that it's the AFP is aware of reports of a Russian individual being detained in Russia for alleged cybercrimes. But yeah, the rumors are that it is this guy, Alexander Emakov. So yeah, even if Australians don't get him in some way, maybe the Russians will. Okay, and finally, Mark Burgess, head of ASIO, was talking to the Senate. I think it was the Senate the other day.
Yes.
Our best friend, of course. White nationalists love old Mike Burgess. So he did say that in terms of the most threatening form of political terrorism in Australia, it does remain Islamic terror. And I guess that's pretty true. We haven't had any major incidents here, but we've had some. But he also said that apparently a former Australian politician got involved with an international spy network, and apparently at one stage tried to convince family of a former Australian Prime Minister to cooperate with that foreign intelligence spy ring.
Yes.
Now you notice I just said
the internet is now saying this person's Paul Keating. I don't have any actual
wait, as in the
about
former
this,
Prime Minister or the former politician? Because
former Prime Minister, and that he did actually work with them, or did end up working with them, which I guess makes sense, and you can kind of guess which spy agency they're talking about.
The Chinese.
Yeah.
I mean, no surprise there on that account. I think we were all kind of expecting it to be China. Well, okay, you've updated it. What I was going to say was that there were widespread calls, especially from the coalition, to name that individual, because if they don't, people will just keep speculating and questioning. Maybe it's this person, maybe it's that person. But you're saying, okay, this former Australian politician was actually Paul Keating. Well, let's see. I usually like it when Paul Keating comes out of the woodwork, because he always has a few choice sound bites to give. Whatever you think of the man who's brilliant with words, and he can be bloody funny sometimes as well. And I do think it's a shame, even though I don't like the guy personally. I think he did a lot of damage to Australia. At least he made Parliament interesting. Question time is just boring now. It was actually interesting back then. But
it's the same kind of shit that a liberal comedian saying about Donald Trump is I don't like the guy, but at least he made politics interesting.
Yes.
Oh man.
So yeah, I guess watch this space. We'll have more on that next week. But yeah, the idea of Paul Keating cooperating with a foreign Asian power, yeah, that definitely doesn't. He basically said that he wanted Australia to become a part of Asia Pacific, not just geographically, but he wanted us economically and culturally intertwined with them. He had a big fetish for Indonesia, for example. He was good friends with
why Indonesia of all places? It's one of the fucking shittest Asiatic countries.
I don't know, but for some reason he had this weird kind of friendship with Suharto going on. It was unusual. Yeah.
Bizarre.
Yeah. Okay, well, that's all we had, guys. I had one story here about Nazis and heavy metal. I don't know if that is really a story for the Racist War, because we just do political news. If we ever come back to you with a live show, and who knows, we might in a few months' time. We're just kind of too busy to do it right now. Maybe we'll talk about that a bit. But anyway, thank you for Tedious for the shout out on one of the recent episodes. That was very nice of Sven to give us a shout out. But yeah, you can catch our show on therightstuff.biz, or you can check out our content at theracer.biz. And yeah, thanks for listening to episode 210, and we'll see you next time.